Okay, welcome back to all of you guys. I'm going to move into this next topic of enlightenment. What is enlightenment? Just like if you were interested in taking a journey to another city, you would kind of like to know a little bit about that city before you start your journey, because that way you can more easily navigate your way to that city. And once you arrive, you'll actually know that you've arrived. So if I said, hey guys, would you like to go to Chiang Rai? You'd probably be like, well, what is Chiang Rai? Where is it? Where is it? What's going on there? What kinds of things are there? Well, I need to kind of explain that to you. And then you're like, yeah, I think I'd like to go there, right? It's like this city up north. It's 3 hours away from Chiang Rai. It's got this and that and this and that. And you're like, yeah, I kind of like to go there. And then you'd be able to navigate your way to it because you know a little bit about it. And once you arrive, you'll know that you're in Chiang Rai. So understanding enlightenment is the same kind of thing. Enlightenment is not a destination. It's a mental state, but surely understanding more about it will help you to navigate your way to it. And once you actually get to enlightenment, you'll be able to more readily know that you're actually experiencing enlightenment. So I'm going to explain to you guys what enlightenment is and walking you through the ins and outs of it. But just understand that as you're getting to learn what is enlightenment, that it's a real challenge for an individual to understand what enlightenment is, because it's kind of like if I sat here and you've never tasted chocolate ice cream before, and I tried to explain chocolate ice cream to you, you kind of know what chocolate ice cream is, but you would not really fully understand what chocolate ice cream is until you actually tasted it yourself. So it's the same kind of thing with enlightenment, that I can sit here and explain it to you all day long, but you're not going to fully understand what it is until you're starting to experience more and more of the qualities of enlightenment. But you'll surely know more about what enlightenment is after our conversation than you do right now. But just understand that by the end of our conversation, you're not going to know everything there is about enlightenment. You will as you start to experience it, though. So this is the ultimate goal of the teachings of the Buddha, is to be able to get to enlightenment. So as we go, just like always, feel free to ask any and all questions that you like. So what enlightenment is it's a mental state that is attainable in this life or also at death, where the mind is completely peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. You've eliminated the causes and conditions that are producing discontent feelings. The mind will be calm and relaxed, but yet attentive and alert. And this mental state is where the mind no longer experiences any discontent feelings. The mind will be concentrated, it'll be steady, it'll be stable, it'll be unshakable. And also, by getting to enlightenment, an individual has escaped the cycle of rebirth. They will no longer experience rebirth over and over and over again. So this is a mental state that is produced by purifying the mind through training of the mind. What you're doing is you're eliminating craving, anger, and ignorance. This is a high-level way to understand the pollutions that the Buddha discovered in the mind. We're going to be talking about this on Wednesday morning. I'm going to help you guys to understand what this is in detail. By the time you've gotten to enlightenment, you've purified the mind where there's no longer any craving, anger, and ignorance in the mind. You'll be practicing the wholesome qualities of generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom in all situations that you're in. So while enlightenment is a mental state that one attains, the path to enlightenment is a purification of the mind through training of the mind, where you're eliminating the conditions that are keeping the mind in the unenlightened state. Those conditions that are keeping the mind in the unenlightened state are this craving, anger, and ignorance. That's what's keeping the mind in the unenlightened state. Those are the pollutions of the mind. But in more detail, they're referred to as the 10 fetters, and I'm going to introduce you to the 10 fetters here in a moment. Sometimes people refer to enlightenment as happiness or ultimate bliss. While there's plenty of happiness in enlightenment, I don't refer to it as happiness or ultimate bliss, because you know what happiness feels like. You've experienced conditional happiness many times, where happiness arises, it changes, and it fades away. This is called conditional happiness. By the time you get to enlightenment, you're experiencing unconditional happiness, where the mind is permanently happy, it's permanently joyful, it's bright and cheerful and uplifted. But it's not this ultimate bliss. What people are talking about when they're describing this is they're typically describing what's referred to as the first jhana. When you get into the first jhana, you're going to experience this ultimate bliss. What the first jhana there's 4 individual jhanas. These are enhanced qualities of mind that you experience on your way to enlightenment. There's 4 individual stages of enlightenment that I'm going to explain to you here in a moment. But before you get to the first stage of enlightenment, you will experience these individual jhanas. These are like phases that the mind goes through where you experience these enhanced qualities of mind. And when you get to the first jhana, there's typically this bliss or this ultimate bliss that's in the mind. The mind's becoming more cheerful and more bright. And oftentimes when people are getting into those jhanas, they think that they're actually enlightened, because what you experience in the jhanas, it's like night and day compared to what you experience when you're off the path to enlightenment to when your mind is in these jhanas. And for people who don't understand, they will actually think that they're enlightened when they get to the jhanas, because it's such a pleasurable experience to be able to have your mind residing in these enhanced qualities of mental states. So they'll think that they're actually enlightened, and they're describing what they're experiencing as enlightenment. And they usually will describe it as ultimate bliss. This is where sometimes you can have people that will tell you that enlightened beings still experience anger or frustration or annoyment or sadness or any of these other discontent feelings, because they're in the jhanas where you do experience those feelings still. They think that they're enlightened, and they're describing what they're experiencing as enlightenment, and they're describing that enlightened beings still experience sadness and anger and frustration because that's what they experience. And they think that they're enlightened, but they're actually not enlightened yet. So you'll have some people that will describe enlightenment in a way that isn't actually true, because they're not experiencing enlightenment. They're experiencing the jhanas. So sometimes you hear people describe enlightenment as this ultimate bliss. And this describes the jhanas, but there's other qualities that you're experiencing in the jhanas besides this ultimate bliss. So these are things that you would end up learning as part of your journey to enlightenment, is what are the jhanas and what are the experiences of being in the jhanas. Because once you understand what the jhanas are and you're experiencing those, that is a good indication for you that you're making your way to the first stage of enlightenment. So there's classes and courses and retreats where I teach you guys what the jhanas are, and so that you know that you're experiencing them. But in this course, I don't do that because we're focused on the foundational teachings. But just understand that some people will refer to the enlightened mental state as this ultimate bliss, when in reality, that's not what enlightenment is. The mind is cheerful, it is bright, it is radiant, it is uplifted. There's lots of joy and gladness in the mind, but I wouldn't describe it as this ultimate bliss. Okay, so enlightenment is this mental state where the mind's peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy, and it's a permanent mental state, and you're no longer experiencing any discontent feelings. Some of the advantages of getting to enlightenment is that the mind is peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. It's a permanent mental state. You've experienced enough sorrow and sadness and guilt and shame and fear and stress and anxiety in your life. You don't need to keep experiencing that over and over and over again. You can escape from that and get to the point where your mind's no longer experiencing it. But you need to learn the wisdom of how to actually do that. So this is one of the advantages of getting to the enlightened mental state. And with the mind completely peaceful and joyful, you'll be able to go through life with ease, and you won't have the struggles and difficulties any longer. That everything that you experience is peaceful and joyful. Because you've purified your mind, not only will you be experiencing this peace and joy, but you also have a high degree of focus, concentration, clarity, and deep memory. Because the mind has been purified, it's performing optimally at this point. You'll notice that you won't experience any of these discontent feelings and others. Sadness, anger, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, loneliness, boredom, shyness, resentment, jealousy, all of these feelings and others are completely eliminated from the enlightened mind. You no longer experience those because the causes and conditions that are producing them have been uprooted and eliminated out of the mind. You'll notice that you have this deep wisdom about the world around you. You will understand things about the world that other people just don't understand. So you'll have this deep wisdom about the path to enlightenment. And you'll be able to be polite, kind, friendly, and respectful to all people in all situations. Right now, you probably struggle and have difficulties with that. There's probably certain people that you might have bitterness and harshness and hostility with, but that is actually coming from your own mind. It's not coming from the other people. And by the time you transform your mind, you'll be able to be polite, kind, friendly, respectful with everybody that you encounter. You won't be causing harm in the world any longer. And because of this, you're going to notice that your personal and professional relationships are at ease, that they're really blossoming, that you have harmonious relationships with all the people around you. Again, this is probably not the case right now. There's probably certain people in your life that you really struggle in those relationships. And that's just because the mind is untrained. And as you train your mind, you'll be able to see the improvement in the condition of your mind in your life. Because everything you experience in life is coming through your mind. It's kind of like the CPU of a computer. The CPU of the computer, everything's going through the CPU. If the CPU, the main computer chip, isn't functioning well, the whole computer isn't functioning well. And the same thing is true about this being who you are. If your mind isn't functioning well, you're not going to feel well. So as you train your mind and you purify your mind will be performing optimally, and you'll see that you'll be able to have harmonious relationships with everyone around you. You'll get to the point where you're not even in a bad mood anymore, because the causes and conditions that produce that have been completely uprooted from the mind. So these are some of the advantages of getting to enlightenment. The way that you attain enlightenment is, first, you would like to focus on the core central teachings, building a foundation for yourself. And that's what we're going to be focused on in this course. These are the foundational teachings that you would need to be able to get to enlightenment. There's other teachings beyond this that you would actually need to get to enlightenment, but these are the beginning teachings that you start with. And I'm going to be pretty much teaching you all of these as part of this course. You're going to need to learn the 3 universal truths, the 4 noble truths, the Eightfold Path, the 5 precepts, the Brahma Viharas, right? I'm going to be teaching you these all in this course. This Brahma Viharas, I'm not going to be teaching it to you directly, but there's kind of a time where I'm kind of indirectly teaching it to you, and I won't necessarily tell you that that's what I'm doing. But as you learn in other courses and retreats, I will teach you the Brahma Viharas. It's in the first book. It's chapter 14. But in this course, I just kind of expose you to the Brahma Viharas without actually teaching it to you. But there's other times where I'll teach it to you. Then you'll learn about the 10 fetters, the 7 factors of enlightenment, and extensive meditation training. This is what you're going to need to focus on when you're first getting started. And I'm going to be introducing you to all of these things as part of this course. And as you're learning and practicing these, as I mentioned earlier, you're not interested in believing any aspect of the teachings. You would like to learn, investigate, and examine the teachings. You'd like to reflect on them to independently verify whether they're true or they're false. And then you would like to practice those teachings, integrating them into your day-to-day life. And that's where you're going to see the real results and the real benefits. So you're not believing anything. You're cultivating wisdom about the natural laws around you. And that's what the Buddha is helping you to be able to see through acquiring wisdom. These are the 10 fetters that an individual is eliminating from the mind as part of their journey to enlightenment. These are the first 5, and then there's 5 higher fetters. But before I talk about those, do you guys have any questions on anything that I've described so far about what enlightenment is and how to actually attain it and what the advantages of getting to enlightenment are? Yes, ma'am. For those of you guys online, you can ask questions by putting that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom in the comments section, and I'll see that. Or in Zoom, you can electronically raise your hand and ask any questions that you like.
Question is, have you obtained the enlightenment?
Have I attained enlightenment?
Yeah.
Okay, so individual who's enlightened, they won't say that they're enlightened. If somebody says that they're enlightened, that's the first indication that they're not enlightened. So like if you're ever at a retreat, or if you're ever at a smoothie shop and someone rolls up and is like, hey, by the way, guess what? I'm enlightened. You can know that they're not enlightened, because that's like boastfulness and arrogance and pride. So you can know that they're not enlightened. So an enlightened being isn't going to say that they are enlightened, but they also aren't going to say they're not enlightened either, because that would be lying. A better way to be able to know whether someone's enlightened or not is start asking them questions like this. Ask them questions, and you can ask me these if you like, is, when's the last time you experienced anger? Or is it possible to eliminate sadness and frustration? Or can you eliminate the ego? Things like this. These are like better questions, because they can answer those kinds of questions, and then you can decide for yourself whether you think that person is enlightened or not. Because an enlightened being would be more interested in helping you to get to enlightenment rather than talking about their own mental state. So you're welcome to ask those kinds of questions if you like, and I'd be pleased to answer them for you.
So what is your last time to be angry?
So people asked me this in 2002 when I was at a retreat in the USA. And the answer that I gave them is I said, I don't know because it's been so long ago. And they said, well, what would your son say if we asked him, when's the last time you got angry? Because if you're going to get angry, it's going to typically be around your family members. And my son happened to be with me in the USA at that point, and he had just walked into the room. And he was only 9 years old at the time. I said, there he is right there. You can ask him. So in front of all the students, there was probably 20 students there. My son was standing in the middle of the room, and they said, when's the last time you saw your dad angry? And basically what he told them was 2017 was the last time that he saw me angry. So that's the last time that I can recall that I was angry through my son. He said that he saw me angry at that time frame, 2017.
Sorry, I have one more question because I'm curious about the status of enlightenment. So you said your last anger is in 2017. So in your daily time, you don't feel anger, or sometimes you just feel anger, but then you have the ability to stop it.
I no longer experience any discontent feelings. So all those feelings that I mentioned to you that are eliminated from the mind, I no longer experience any of them. So the things that I'm sharing with you about what enlightenment is, this isn't something somebody told me or something that I read in a book or anything like that. These are things that I'm experiencing, and that's why I can share it for you as this is what I describe enlightenment to be, based on the mental state that I'm experiencing. And then I share with you the teachings of what it took for me to get to this particular mental state. But whether you consider that to be enlightenment or not is up to you, because there's not a general consensus in the world of what enlightenment is, but I'm describing to you what enlightenment is based on my experience. So I no longer experience those feelings, even internally. I don't experience it. My mind is incapable of experiencing these things. In fact, like when my son comes home with like a bad report card or something like that, I kind of have to work up my mind a little bit to try to speak just a little bit firm to him sometimes. I don't speak harsh or aggressive with him, but I have to kind of firm up what I say to him. I have to say things like, Bailan, we've talked about your grades before. You've been doing this now for several months and you haven't improved your grades. You really need to work on this, right? I really have to work up a lot of energy just to even say that kind of thing to him, because my mind just doesn't think that way. It doesn't think in a harsh and bitter and hostile way, and I can't function that way. The mind is just incapable of being harsh and bitter and hostile towards others, that the mind just won't function that way. It's incapable of doing it because the mind doesn't have the anger and the hatred and the ill will that it once did.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, so I don't see any questions online here. So let's go to the next thing, which I'm going to introduce you to these fetters. This is how you get to enlightenment, is by purifying the mind of these 10 fetters. What I'm going to do is introduce you to them so you kind of know what they are, but then I'm going to focus you on the core central teachings, because this isn't something that you need to know in detail right now, but just understand everything that I'm teaching you and everything the Buddha has to share with you is in one way or another helping you to eliminate these 10 fetters. So the reason why we refer to them as fetters is that during the lifetime of the Buddha, if you were a prisoner and they were trying to keep you confined to a certain area, they would attach a fetter to your ankle. What a fetter is a shackle and a chain and a ball, and they would keep you confined in a certain area. So they would turn you out into a field, and then you would be there amongst all these other prisoners. Where today we put people in prison cells or jail cells, they would attach a fetter to your ankle, a shackle and a chain and a ball. So when the Buddha discovered these individual pollutions in the mind, he referred to them as fetters because they're keeping the mind trapped and confined in this continuous frustration and agitation and annoyance over and over and over and over again, where you keep experiencing discontentedness. But when you purify your mind of these fetters, like you've gotten rid of the shackle off your chain, off your ankle, now you're free. The mind is now free. So he refers to them as fetters because of that. So here I'm going to introduce you to each one of these just in an introductory way, just to kind of help you understand what he's talking about. What this personal existence view is, this is where the mind is confused and has misunderstanding, thinking that this body is you or this mind is you. Where the mind clings to this, thinking that this is who you are. And if you're being perceived by people in a way that is agreeable to you, you get pleasant feelings. And if you're not being perceived in the way you want to be perceived, then you get painful feelings. So for example, if you've ever been in a social situation and you spilt something on your clothing, like spaghetti sauce or chocolate ice cream, and you got embarrassed, that was your personal existence view, because you wanted to be perceived by others in a certain way. And when you spilled something on your clothing, you felt that this body is you and you're not being perceived by others in the way you want to be perceived. So your mind became embarrassed. Or if you ever looked in the mirror and you saw a wrinkle or a mole or a pimple or a gray hair or something like that, and your mind was shaken up by that, that's your personal existence view, because you want to be perceived by others in a certain way, and you're clinging to this body thinking that this is who you are. And when other people are perceiving you in a positive way, you're happy. But when they don't perceive you in that way, you're frustrated or agitated or annoyed or experiencing some other painful feeling. This is because of the personal existence view. Then there's the self-identity, where the mind is holding on to an idea of who you think you are within your own mind. You might have the identity of I am Chinese, or I am Korean, or I am American, or I am Lithuanian, or I am Spanish, or I am Mexican, or any of this I am around your culture, your ethnicity, your sexual orientation, your nationality, your job or occupation. This is something that the mind can hold on to. So if you were ever in a relationship with like a boyfriend or girlfriend, and your mind identified with I am a boyfriend, I am a girlfriend, when you guys broke up, you might have really struggled during that period of time because your mind doesn't identify with I am single. And now when you were single, your mind was really frustrated or agitated or annoyed with that. And you might have felt like you wanted to hurry up and get right back into another relationship. And your mind thought that that was the way to solve the problem. But that's not going to solve the problem. The problem is this personal existence view is in the mind. Or say if you ever had a job, like say you were a police officer and you retired, or you got injured, or you got fired, and now you were doing something else like a taxi driver. If your mind is identifying with I am a police officer, now when you're doing that role as a taxi driver, you could really struggle during that time and feel really frustrated because your mind doesn't identify with I am a taxi driver. It's identifying with I am a police officer. And now that you're not doing that anymore, your mind will really struggle. So this personal existence view is where your mind's confused and having misunderstanding, thinking that this body or this mind is who you are as a person. So I'm going to teach you about this in more detail tomorrow, but this is the first fetter. And sometimes it's challenging for people to understand that because you spend so much time accumulating this personal existence view. Then there's something called doubt. What doubt is where you have doubt about the teachings of the Buddha, where you have doubt about the Buddha himself or the community that you're part of. You might have doubt about the teacher who you're studying with, or you might have doubt about your own ability to get to enlightenment. And if you have doubt about any of these things, it will hinder you from being able to get to enlightenment. So the way that you get rid of this doubt is not through blind belief or faith or anything like that. The way you get rid of it is through investigating the teachings. Because by you investigating and examining the teachings, you will be able to see that they're true. And when you see that they're true and you're implementing them into your life and the condition of your mind is improving and the condition of your life is improving, you'll eventually get to the point where you have no doubt about these teachings. You won't be enlightened yet by that point, but you will get to the point where you know that these teachings are working to help you. So you get rid of doubt through investigation of the teachings. That's how you get rid of this. And then ultimately what you'll cultivate is where you'll have confidence in the Buddha. You will have confidence in his teachings. You'll have confidence in the community. You'll have confidence in your teacher, and you'll have confidence in your own ability to get to enlightenment because you've seen so much progress that your mind is gradually making your way towards enlightenment. So you'll have confidence in all these things because you're actually seeing the improvement in your day-to-day life through your mind and through your day-to-day life. Then there's something called wrong behavior and observances. there's two aspects of this. What wrong behavior is there certain unwise things that you're doing with your moral conduct that is causing difficulties in your life, the way that you're interacting with people through maybe your speech or your actions, or maybe your livelihood and the way you sustain your life. And when you're functioning in that way, you're putting out harm through your speech or your actions. This is all going to come back to you. So as long as you have what's called wrong behavior, you're putting out harm, and harm is going to keep coming back to you. And how can you get to a peaceful and joyful mind and a peaceful and joyful life if you keep having this harm that keeps coming back to you? So what the Buddha teaches you is how to shut down this unwholesome and unwise moral conduct. It's kind of like if an oil pipe spewed and it broke and it was spewing oil all over the world, you would like to shut down that oil pipe so it's not spewing oil all over the world. So if you got this unwise and unwholesome moral conduct that's spewing out into the world, you would like to shut that down. So by shutting down your unwise moral conduct, it's going to help you improve your interactions and your relationships with the people in your day-to-day life. So by the time you get rid of wrong behavior, you will be practicing the Eightfold Path through the moral conduct section, which is what I'm going to be teaching you tomorrow. You'll be practicing that for at least 1 year extensively and in detail. You won't have any slip-ups of the Eightfold Path in terms of right speech, right action, and right livelihood. And then in terms of wrong observances, what this is where your mind might believe that rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship are leading to some beneficial result in your life. You might have experienced those things where you've gone to places where you did rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship. And if your mind believes that these things are going to lead to an improvement in your life, then your mind has what's called wrong observances. Whether you choose to do these things or not is always your choice. But if your mind thinks that that's what it takes to get to an improved life, then you're not understanding the number one problem that the Buddha discovered. The number one problem that he discovered is this lack of wisdom in the mind, that the mind doesn't understand these natural laws, that you're going to need to cultivate wisdom about these natural laws. And there's no aspect of a rite, ritual, ceremony, or worship that's going to lead to the cultivation of wisdom. So if you have this belief in your mind that you can get some water sprinkled on you, or a rope tied on your wrist, or maybe you eat a wafer, you drink a little bit of wine or something like this at some ceremony, and somehow this is going to miraculously make your life better, then your mind is still having wrong observances. By the time you get rid of wrong observances, you will know that these things don't lead to an improvement in your life. But whether you choose to do them or not is up to you, right? You might be around your family. It might be a family holiday or a big national holiday, and people are going to the church or the synagogue or the mosque or some temple or something. And maybe they're choosing to do these rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship. But your mind knows that this doesn't lead to enlightenment, and it doesn't lead to the cultivation of wisdom. But whether you choose to do those things or not is your choice. But your mind will know that it's not those things that's going to lead to an improvement in your life. And oftentimes, by the time somebody has actually come to learn with me, they've already eliminated that portion of this fetter because they've already done rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship in other parts of their life, and they see that it doesn't work. And now they're coming to learn with me because they know I don't do those things. And oftentimes, students have already eliminated that before they've ever learned with me. So you might be in that kind of category. So then there's sensual desire. This is what we refer to as craving, desire, attachment. This is where the mind is longing, yearning through the eyes, the ears, the nose, the tongue, the body, and then the mind itself. It wants things to be permanently agreeable to you. So any contact that you have through these sense bases, the mind wants things to be permanently agreeable. That's the sensual desire. But then when you experience agreeable contact, you get pleasant feelings. But then when you experience disagreeable contact through the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, or body or mind, that's where you experience the painful feelings. So this sensual desire is the fetter or the taint or the pollution of mind that is motivating all these discontent feelings. So when you eliminate sensual desire through all the training of the Buddha, you will no longer experience discontent feelings. And when you eliminate all the other fetters, you will completely eliminate your discontent feelings. So here, sensual desire is the longing, yearning through the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, the body, or the mind itself, wanting permanently agreeable contact, wanting things to always be pleasant and agreeable and comfortable. And this just is impossible because you live in an impermanent world. Then when your sensual desire is not getting fulfilled, when you're not getting what you want, that's when your ill will arise. Your ill will is your anger, your hostility, your bitterness, your harshness, aggressiveness through your intentions, your speech, and your actions. These two fetters are actually linked together, because as long as your sensual desire is getting fulfilled, you'll get pleasant feelings. But when your sensual desire is not getting fulfilled, that's where the painful feelings will come in, and you will typically attribute those painful feelings to something external. And you will think that something external is causing them. And that's where your ill will arise, and you'll be bitter, harsh, and hostile towards other people. You're going to hear more about this as we go in the course. So this is the 5 lower fetters. Then there's the higher fetters. Desire for form and desire for formless is where you have a desire to exist in this world. The desire for form is where you have a desire to exist in the human realm or the animal realm. You have a desire, you're longing, yearning to be in this world. Or desire for formless is where you have a desire for existence in the formless realms, like hell, afflicted spirits, and heavenly realm. And yes, there are people who have a desire to exist in hell, right? There are people like that in the world, but there's a lot of people who have this desire to exist in the heavenly realm. So if you have this longing, yearning, and this desire to exist in the world, your mind is still holding on and you haven't let go yet. Then there's something called conceit. Conceit is your arrogance, your pride, your measuring and comparing, thinking that you're superior or inferior to other people. This is where you're feeling boastful, and you might be looking down on other people, or you might be looking up to other people with such awe and admiration. You might be judging other people and trying to measure and compare whether you're superior or inferior to those people. This is referred to oftentimes as the ego. And as long as you have this ego, people are going to push you aside, and they're not going to be interested in being around you, because people don't like it when you're talking down to them and being boastful and arrogant and prideful. This is coming from our animal existences in the past, where we've been animals. We needed conceit because we needed to know this pecking order. If we didn't know this pecking order when we were animals, like alpaca wolves, or if we were in a herd of elephants, we wouldn't have been able to survive, because we needed to know who was above us and who was below us, so we could learn how to be wolves and we could learn how to be elephants. Because if we didn't know who the matriarch of our herd was, we wouldn't know where the food is, where the migration paths are. We wouldn't know where the watering holes are. We wouldn't have survived just roaming around as a single elephant in the forest. So we needed to have this strong pecking order in the animal realm. But here in the human realm, we don't need that, because that's just going to hinder you from being able to relate to all beings harmoniously. So we can actually eliminate this conceit out of the mind and reside more peaceful and more joyful in our day-to-day life. Then there's something called restlessness. What restlessness is where the mind is overactive, where it's worried and having anxiety. You might actually see this in your body. If you ever sit somewhere and you're bobbing your knee, or you're shaking side to side, or you're tapping your fingers or things like this is the restlessness of the mind. The mind's not calm and still and steady, that the mind has to be moving. There's always moving, right? You might see this for yourself, or you might see this for other people, like tapping a pencil or tapping a pen all the time. This is because the mind's overactive and it's coming out through the body. So by the time you eradicate this out of the mind, your mind can be still and steady and quieted at all times. You won't have this overactivity in your mind where your mind's just ruminating about different things. Then there's something called ignorance. This is like the fetter of all fetters. If it wasn't for this fetter, all the others wouldn't actually exist. But ignorance is this unknowing of true reality, this lack of wisdom, this confusion or misunderstanding, that because the mind doesn't understand the natural laws of existence, it continues to struggle and have difficulties in its day-to-day life. So as we cultivate wisdom through learning, reflecting, and practicing, that's what's going to eradicate this ignorance and allow you to learn about all these things that you need in order to make your way to the purification of the mind and make your way to enlightenment. So you'll need to learn about things like the 3 universal truths, the 4 noble truths, the Eightfold Path, the 5 precepts, the 3 wholesome and unwholesome roots, the natural law of karma, the cycle of rebirth. These are all detailed in the teachings that we share. This is going to help you awaken to the natural laws of existence. When we talk about awakening, what that means is cultivation of wisdom. And that's what's ultimately going to eradicate this particular fetter. The way that this fetter gets eradicated is, yes, through intellectual learning. There's a certain amount of intellectual learning that needs to happen, but it's through your practice that this ignorance gets eliminated. So, for example, when we were growing up as kids, we all learned that it's unwise to drink alcohol and use drugs. We understood that intellectually, but we may not have practiced it. We might have went out and used drugs and alcohol. That's because of our ignorance, because of our lack of wisdom. We didn't understand how harmful these substances are, so we decided to ingest them. Right? So we had a certain amount of intellectual understanding that these things were unwise, but because of our ignorance and our unknowing of true reality, our lack of wisdom, we still chose to do it. So the way that you eradicate your ignorance is through your practice of the teachings. This is how people in Thailand know whether you're enlightened or not, because they can observe your practice. That's not what they're doing. They're not going around trying to determine who's enlightened and who's not, but that's one of the ways that you can determine whether someone's enlightened is observe the way that they interact in the world. Because by the time somebody's eradicated all these fetters, it will be impossible for them to function in any other way than the way that an enlightened being would function. Their mind would be completely peaceful and completely joyful because all these things have been uplifted and eradicated and eliminated from the mind, that the mind's been purified, and now they're practicing the teachings on a day-to-day basis. It's not that they just understand them intellectually, it's that they're actually practicing the teachings. And that's where the ignorance is fully eradicated from the mind. As you're eliminating those 10 fetters, your mind is going to be moving through these 4 stages of enlightenment. I'm going to help you understand what each of these 4 stages are. And then there's something called a Buddha that we'll talk about what that is as well. So this first stage of enlightenment, it's called stream enterer. What a stream enterer is someone who's eliminated the first 3 fetters. If you eliminate personal existence view, doubt, and wrong behavior and observances, your mind will be experiencing a significant amount of peace and joy, much more than you did when you were off the path to enlightenment. The discontentedness that you experience in the first stage of enlightenment is a mere fraction of what you once used to experience. There's other things that you need to learn and grow and develop and cultivate in order to get to the first stage of enlightenment. But as a whole, and a primary thing is that you've eradicated these first 3 fetters. So you would know what each one of these fetters are. You would know what the symptoms of them are. You would know how to eliminate them, and you will know how to know that you've actually eliminated them. Right now isn't that time to be able to learn that, but by the time you get to the first stage of enlightenment, you will have learned that. There's a retreat that I teach each January where the entire retreat is all the teachings you need to get to the first stage of enlightenment. So you guys might be interested in that. It's been recorded many times, and I teach it every year in January. So we call this a stream enterer because just like a log enters the stream and you will eventually get to the ocean, that log will eventually get to the ocean. If you get to the first stage of enlightenment, you will eventually get to enlightenment. It's only a matter of time. Either in this life or some future life, you will ultimately get to enlightenment. A maximum of 7 lives. Doesn't mean you have to be reborn 7 times, but a maximum of 7. So some of you guys might have been stream enterers in your past lives where you got to the first stage of enlightenment. And now is your opportunity to actually get to enlightenment in this life. But you don't have to actually be reborn multiple times. You could have never been in the first stage of enlightenment before, learn these teachings in this life, and actually get to enlightenment in this life. But if someone dies in the first stage of enlightenment, they will be reborn back into the human realm with another opportunity to be able to make their way to enlightenment. Then there's something called a once returner. This individual has already eliminated the first 3 fetters because of up here, But then they've thinned out number 4 and 5, the sensual desire and the ill will. So if you're noticing that you don't have as much interest in sex anymore, this is a good indication that your sensual desire is starting to be eliminated, because that's typically what's happening as you're eliminating sensual desire. There's multiple sensual desires that are starting to be eliminated, but sex is one that's really strong in a lot of people's minds. And as you start to eliminate sensual desire, the craving for sex starts to be diminishing. And then you might also notice that your anger and your hatred starts to diminish as well. Where when we were maybe teenagers or early adulthood, we might have had all this anger and this fierceness in the mind, where as you are starting to eliminate sensual desire, your ill will starts to diminish as well. For the second stage of enlightenment, you're still experiencing anger and frustration and all those things, but it's been significantly reduced by this point. And this individual is referred to as a once returner, because if they die in that stage of enlightenment, they will come back to the human world one more time before they get to enlightenment. So again, some of you guys might actually have been a once returner in your last life, and now this is your opportunity to be able to get to enlightenment. Then there's something called a non-returner. A non-returner is someone who's eliminated the 5 lower fetters. This individual is rarely experiencing discontentedness, like once every 2 months, once every 3 to 4 or 5 months. And when they experience discontentedness, it's very minimal and very insignificant when it occurs. It can last for all of like 30 seconds, and then they can completely get it out of their mind. And because of this, they go through these long periods of time for months, like 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, where their mind is completely peaceful. They sometimes become complacent in this stage of enlightenment, because the mind is not yet enlightened. It still has some residual craving and clinging, that it's still experiencing discontentedness, but it's very infrequent and is very insignificant when it's occurring. So you need to be really diligent in this stage of enlightenment to stay on top of your practice, that you don't ignore these little incidents of discontentedness that is occurring. If someone dies in this stage of enlightenment, they will be reborn into the heavenly realm, and they will attain enlightenment in that particular realm. So they won't actually return to the human realm. They will be reborn into the heavenly realm, and they will actually get to enlightenment in that next life. But that's not the ultimate goal of these teachings. The ultimate goal of the teachings is to get to the 4th stage of enlightenment, referred to as an arahant. This individual has completely purified their entire mind, where all the individual fetters have been completely eliminated from the mind. And because of this, they're experiencing complete peace, complete calm, serenity, contentedness, and joy. It's a permanent mental state. You will know that you've gotten to this because it'll be 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. You're not experiencing any discontent feelings whatsoever. That the mind is completely peaceful, bright, uplifted, cheerful, radiant, glad. It's easy to smile. You'll be able to see that for yourself. And you'll have eliminated all the 10 fetters. And during the lifetime of the Buddha, they refer to this as an arahant. This individual has completely purified their mind, where today we might refer to this person as an enlightened being, right? That's usually the words that we use. And when an individual dies in this stage of enlightenment, they're not reborn anywhere in the cycle of rebirth. They've escaped the cycle of rebirth. The Buddha doesn't say what comes next for an enlightened being once they die. He leaves it as an undeclared teaching. He specifically mentions it. He says, remember what I taught. I taught this. And he says, remember what I did not teach. I did not teach this. And he gives 10 individual things that he did not teach. One of the things he didn't teach is what happens after enlightenment, if anything at all. But by the time you get to enlightenment, your mind is so peaceful and so joyful, you're not going to care what's next, if there's anything next. Because if there's anything next, it's either as good as what you're already experiencing, or it's better, right? And if there isn't anything next, oh, well, so be it. You've enjoyed your life. You had a wonderful life. You experienced multiple years of being peaceful and joyful during your enlightened mental state. So whatever point in time in your life that you get to enlightenment, you will experience the rest of your life in that peaceful and joyful mental state. So if something's next, great. If it's not, that's fine too. But if the Buddha did know what was next and he didn't explain it, he did that wisely. Because if he explained something that was next, and let's just say there's this miraculous thing that happens after enlightenment, well, that's just one more craving that you need to eliminate. Because if you were longing, yearning for that thing, then now how could you ever get to enlightenment? You wouldn't be able to get to enlightenment. So enlightenment isn't about an afterlife. Enlightenment is about getting to a peaceful and joyful life now, in this life. It's not about something that's going to happen later. It's about getting to that now. And that's what the Buddha kept you focused on. And that's why he wisely, if he knew, didn't share what may or may not come next. He just left it as an undeclared teaching. And that's actually going to help you to be able to get to enlightenment. So any questions on the 10 fetters or the 4 stages of enlightenment? Anything you guys would like to ask? Remember, those of you online, you can ask questions as well.
What is desire with formless?
Desire for formless, what is that? That's where you have desire to be reborn into the formless realms like hell, afflicted spirit, or heavenly realm. You know, there's quite a few people in the world that do have a desire to be in heaven after this life. And if they have that, their mind is still clinging and still holding on to the world. They haven't fully let go. So they're not going to be able to experience enlightenment because their mind is still craving and still clinging. Would you mind getting a mic? We have a bunch of people online. Sorry. It's already.
There are many people in the land of formlessness.
In the formless realm, are there many beings there? There are several beings in that realm. During the lifetime of a Buddha, that realm is actually going to really fill up because beings are getting closer and closer to enlightenment. And if you're making your way to enlightenment and you fall short of it for any reason, there's a good chance that you'll be reborn in the heavenly realm. It's not a permanent existence in the heavenly realm. Those beings still need to get to enlightenment, and they can be reborn back into lower realms, like into the human realm. They can even be reborn down into hell or animal realm or afflicted spirits and things like that. So it's not a permanent existence. And during the lifetime of a Buddha, because the teachings are so much shining in the world, the heavenly realm really fills up. I couldn't tell you like an exact number of how many beings are in there, but there's plenty of beings in the heavenly realm.
Can they observe us?
Yes, these realms, they're not in some far distant place. They're all in the same time and space as us. So just like a human being is sitting in this chair, if I got up and left, maybe there could be a dog that comes in and sits here. We're all in the same time and space. So these hell beings, the afflicted spirit beings, the heavenly beings, they're all right here in the same time and space. So they can interact with us. And some people can see these beings. Some people can hear these beings. Some people can interact with them. But that's not part of the path. But some people do experience this. And the Buddha teaches you that if you're able to do these kinds of things, that you don't make money out of it. You don't cling to that ability. There's descriptions in his teachings where he was teaching heavenly beings. Heavenly beings would come to him and ask him questions and try to get help with the path to enlightenment, and he would be teaching them.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. You're welcome. Yes, ma'am.
My question is, if I want to get to the state of enlightenment, will it help if I reduce the sensual desire on purpose in my life? Like I try to eat cleaner food, or I try to move to the suburb with less noise in my ears, or I try to do something like not very comfortable physically.
Yes, those kinds of things are helpful. You'll see that as I teach you the Eightfold Path and all the other teachings, that I'm going to show you how to eliminate sensual desire. So even though I'm introducing you to these fetters now, what I'm going to be doing as part of this course is going to the foundational teachings. But I introduce you to the fetters so that you understand underlying all of the things that I'm going to teach you is eradicating this. So when we're doing breathing mindfulness meditation, or when I'm teaching you any other aspect of the path to enlightenment, it's all coming back to eradication of the 10 fetters. But I don't explain that to you in a foundational course like this, exactly what fetters necessarily. But as you move on in your journey, you're going to be able able to see how that eightfold path and the 5 precepts and all these other teachings that you're learning is essentially helping you to eradicate these. So there are certain tools and techniques to help you eliminate sensual desire, and that's what the whole path is about, is helping you to eradicate these fetters. And that's a big one that you're really working on. Yeah, you're welcome. Okay. It looks like somebody's saying I dropped out. I think maybe you're saying the sound, maybe the audio was impermanent. I think you should be able to hear the audio now. Let me just check to make sure. Yeah, the audio is on, so you should be able to hear our audio. Okay, so now let me help you understand what a fully perfectly enlightened one is, what a Buddha is. I've already talked about this just when we were talking about the life story of the Buddha, but now I'm going to go into more detail about it. An individual who's a Buddha, they're going to meet 3 primary criteria, and then there's going to be other things too. A Buddha is going to have gotten to enlightenment by themselves without the help of any teachers or any guides. That's the first criteria. The second criteria is that they're going to dedicate the rest of their life to sharing their independently discovered teachings with countless people during their lifetime. And countless people will get to enlightenment during that person's lifetime. Then the third criteria is that they're going to preserve their teachings in such a way that countless more people are going to get to enlightenment after their death. So these are the 3 primary criteria of what make a Buddha a Buddha. They get to enlightenment by themselves without the help of any teachers or any guides. They then dedicate the rest of their life to sharing their independently discovered teachings, and countless people will get to enlightenment during that person's lifetime. They will then preserve their teachings so that countless more people will get to enlightenment after their death. Another criteria is that an individual who's going to become a Buddha will have a profound memory, far beyond anything that you could potentially imagine. Your memory is somewhat limited. You have like a limited capacity. It's like a hard drive. You maybe have 500 gigabytes or 1 terabyte. And when you get to a certain limit of your capacity, you have to delete old files in order to store new files. This is why, like in the last 5 years or so, you can remember pretty much everything that you've been doing, give or take some things here or there, but you generally know what you've been up to for the last 5 years or so. But when you think back to your childhood, you just kind of have like spotty memories. You can remember some things in your childhood, but you don't have direct recall of exactly what was going on in any of these particular events that you were involved in as a child. And that's because you've had to delete old files in order to store new files, right? An individual who's going to become a Buddha, they don't have that limited capacity. They have an unlimited capacity to be able to remember things. So they will remember countless details about their current life in their past lives too. And this is how they actually get to enlightenment without the help of any teachers or any guides, because they accumulate wisdom over multiple lifetimes, and they put that all together in their last lifetime in order to be able to get to enlightenment. So you'll be able to see that your mind doesn't have this ability, and this will help you to be able to see that you can become enlightened, but you won't be a Buddha because you're not going to meet these 3 criteria, and you don't have this criteria as well. Then you'll be able to quickly determine the condition of a Buddha will be able to quickly determine the condition of the mind of another person and then provide them teachings that are going to help them on the path to enlightenment. This is one of the qualities of a Buddha, that they can observe these pollutions and these fetters in the mind of somebody else, and then they can offer them teachings that are going to help them to be able to purify their mind and get to enlightenment. But they only do that when the students are interested in learning with them and soliciting guidance. They're not going to just walk down the street, see somebody that they don't know, and then just jump in and say, hey, by the way, I noticed that you're pretty conceited and you have a lot of ego. You might think about eliminating that, right? A Buddha wouldn't do that. They wouldn't give unsolicited guidance, right? But they can quickly determine the condition of the mind of another person. Also, an individual who's a Buddha will have a deep practice of their own teachings. They will be a living, breathing, walking example of their teachings. Whatever they teach, they're going to also be practicing those same things. Because an individual who's a Buddha is wise enough to understand that their students are learning just as much through their spoken words as they are through their actions. And a Buddha is motivated to see countless people get to enlightenment. They're interested in seeing many, 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 many people get to enlightenment. And one of the ways that they teach is, yes, through their spoken words, but also through their actions. So an individual who's a Buddha will be a living, breathing, walking example of their teachings. And that helps their students to be able to understand how to practice the teachings through their own practice and actually showing students how to actually practice the teachings. So these are some of the criteria of what makes a Buddha a Buddha. And we refer to this individual as a fully, perfectly enlightened one. And the reason why is because by the time they get to enlightenment, they don't have any baggage. Where like if you learn from a teacher who's not a Buddha, you might be learning things that didn't actually lead to your enlightenment, but you still kind of do them out of respect for your teacher, right? So maybe what you've learned, maybe 70, 80, 90% of it actually led to your enlightenment and you're enlightened. But maybe there's like 5%, 10% of things that you're still doing that didn't actually lead to your enlightenment, but you're still doing those kinds of things. By the time someone gets to enlightenment as a Buddha, they don't have that extra baggage because they don't have teachers, they don't have guides. So if they sit down and they actually work on a meditation and they're trying to train their mind, if they see that it improves the condition of their mind, they know that that's part of the path to enlightenment and they retain that as wisdom to be able to share with their students. But if they try a certain meditation and it's not working in order to improve the condition of their mind, they can see that very clearly and they will discard that meditation and they won't practice it any longer. So by the time they get to enlightenment, what they know in terms of the teachings is the path to enlightenment. That's what they know inside and out, backwards and forwards. They know other things as well, but in terms of the path to enlightenment, they know it inside and out, backwards and forwards. And then they spend the rest of their life illuminating that path for other people to be able to help them see how to get to enlightenment. It's like they're putting down lights along the sides of the path to make it easy for other people to be able to see it. And that's why we refer to them as a fully, perfectly enlightened one, because their mind is fully, perfectly enlightened. They don't have any extra baggage whatsoever. Okay, so you guys have any questions on the stages of enlightenment or what a Buddha is? Anything you guys would like to ask at all? Yeah, Rona? Okay.
I was thinking about the part that a Buddha should be someone who independently discovered the path to enlightenment.
Mm-hmm.
So does it make it almost impossible for another being to be another Buddha because the path has already been discovered?
So the Buddha discovered the path 2,500 years ago. He's the declarer, the originator of the path. And then he brought the teachings into the world in a way that they were really shining bright in the world. But then after his death, the teachings slowly declined. And he predicted this during his lifetime. He described it. And he talked about how his teachings would be really bright and very strong for the first 500 years after his life. And then he gives these 500-year cycles where his teachings would gradually decline. And prior to just recently, the teachings were in a very disheveled way. There's lots of words that people are using that aren't actually representing the teachings of the Buddha well. The books and resources that are available, there's a lot of misunderstanding in the world about the teachings of the Buddha. And that's what the Buddha predicted that would occur. But then he talked about this other Buddha that would come into the world called Maitreya Buddha, who would arise in the world and they would restore his teachings back into the world in a way that countless other people would be able to learn them and understand them. So while his teachings are around, prior to recently, the teachings were in a very disheveled format. So any new Buddha that would come into the world, they would be able to get to enlightenment by themselves, but it would be very challenging for them because the teachings aren't in a pure format. If they were in a pure format, then everybody would be getting to enlightenment really readily and really easily. So any new individual who's going to be a Buddha, they would need to be able to sort through all those misunderstandings that currently exist in the world about his teachings in order to be able to see how to actually get to enlightenment. So there can be a Buddha today, and the Buddha actually predicted that there would be a Buddha at this time frame. He gave these 500-year cycles, and they sync up to the year 2017. That he mentioned that at the year 2017, there would be this new Buddha that would come into the world and explain his teachings in a way that countless people would be able to then understand how to get to enlightenment. So he gave these 500-year cycles, and he died in 483 BC. And then if you do the math, it equals 2017 that this new Buddha would come into the world and start restoring his teachings. And that individual, whoever that person would be, would need to understand the teachings on their own and then bring a renewed understanding that other people don't understand, because the world is massively misunderstanding the teachings of the Buddha. We're exactly where he said that we would be. In these 500-year cycles, these 500-year cycles happened exactly the way he said they would happen. And we hit this low point at the year 2017 where people had massive misunderstanding of what his teachings are. And then from that point forward, an individual would be able to restore them from that point forward. But they would not be learning exactly what people are teaching nowadays, because what people are teaching nowadays doesn't actually lead to enlightenment, because they're using inaccurate vocabulary and description of the teachings, and the teachings are in such disheveled format. So that new individual would need to formulate the teachings in such a way that keeps to what the Buddha actually taught, but then provides them in a way that people today would be able to get to enlightenment.
So may I ask, so you learned from the Buddha's original teachings and also you followed a teacher. Is it correct?
I don't have any teachers. I never learned from any teachers.
So you learned the original teachings by yourself?
Yes, that's true.
Oh, didn't know that part of the story. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. You're welcome. Yes, sir.
Just a very basic question. It's like that. So other than the first one, all of the other ones can be achieved by an enlightened person. They just didn't get there by themselves.
That's
right?
not true. A regular enlightened being wouldn't experience these first three. They also don't have this profound memory. They have a deeper memory, they have a clearer memory, but they don't have the same level of memory as an individual who's a Buddha. So these four are not something that the average enlightened being would have, because they wouldn't have gotten to enlightenment by themselves without the help of teachers or guides. They wouldn't share their independently discovered teachings with countless people, and then countless people wouldn't get to enlightenment. They also wouldn't preserve the teachings because a Buddha would already be preserving them. They also wouldn't have this profound memory that they could recall countless details from their past lives in this life. They would have a deep memory, and they might even be able to observe some of the things from their past lives, but it wouldn't be to the same level as an actual Buddha. But an enlightened being would be able to quickly determine the condition of someone else's mind and then offer teachings to them. And they would be a living, breathing, walking example of the teachings. They would be practicing them flawlessly. So an average enlightened being would be practicing these two, but they wouldn't be able to do these four.
Okay, so even the Arahant will, obviously the first three they won't have.
And they won't have this one either, number four. They will have a deep memory, but they won't have this profound memory that an individual who's a Buddha would have.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
Is the Buddha's profound memory due to perhaps him
Sounds like they need batteries changed. Yeah. There we go. It's not working? Yeah, I think the batteries just need to change. You can use another one.
the astral plane?
What's the astral plane?
So in other words, maybe the memories are not stored in the body, but the Buddha's accessing memories from another plane.
Yeah, that's not the way the world works. That's a misunderstanding of the world. If people are teaching that kind of thing, it's not actually true. Memories don't exist in some far distant world or even in the air and space. They also don't exist in the body as well. the mind is what stores memory. The mind and the brain are two different things. The brain is the physical organ, where the mind is like this non-physical, non-tangible. You can't really point to the mind. Most Westerners will point to the head when they talk about the mind. Thais will touch their heart because they think about the mind as being in the heart. People from the Indian culture, they tend to think about the mind as being outside the body. But in reality, you can't really point to it because it's not physical. It doesn't exist in any particular place, but it's non-physical, it's intangible. But that's where all the memories and the wisdom and those kinds of things exist, is in the mind itself. In the individual who's going to become a Buddha, even in the unenlightened state, they have a profound memory. And by the time they get to enlightenment, they have a really deep memory. And this is one of the ways that they're able to help so many people, because they can remember countless details about their students, and they can remember the teachings very crisp and very clear. They can recite the teachings so easily, using the same examples, describing the teachings the same way, repetitively over and over and over again, because their mind is performing so optimally, and it has this deep, profound memory far beyond what anybody could ever imagine that is in the unenlightened state, or even an enlightened being can't imagine the level of depth of the memory of an individual who's an actual Buddha.
Because perhaps they've lost their fetters.
Everybody who's gotten to enlightenment will have eliminated their fetters, but an individual who's going to become a Buddha, they have one quality of their mind that is different than everybody else, is that they have this unlimited capacity. The way you think about it is like a hard drive. Like your hard drive might be 500 gigabytes or 1 terabyte. This individual who's going to become a Buddha, there's no capacity limit. They can remember countless things. They don't have a limit to their capacity. That's the nature of this individual. When they're born into the world, that's a quality of their mind that they have that nobody else has. Mm-hmm.
And do students of Buddha memories improve?
Yes, absolutely. By the time you're making your way to enlightenment, you're purifying your mind of the pollution, your memory will surely improve. It will become more deep, but you're not going to have this unlimited capacity like a Buddha would have. Mm-hmm. Oh, yes, ma'am.
Hello. I can remember as a child, prior to being 7 years old, experiencing a change and noticing that I couldn't remember the same way anymore. So the example that I would give is to say, if I watched a movie, it's like prior to that time, I was able to literally recount the movie and all of its details. Mm-hmm. But then I experienced this change and was no longer able to remember that way. Mm-hmm. I guess I'm just curious if other people have experienced that, or just curious what you think of that.
Yeah, I'm not sure. You could talk to people at break and stuff like that and see what other people think. I'm not sure. I can remember countless details about my current life and my past life. So I'm not sure. I haven't had that kind of experience. When I watch movies, though, I typically don't remember them because I just watch them and enjoy them for the moment in the artistic part, but I don't retain it in my mind. I usually just kind of like discard it so that I can continue to, remember all the things about the path to enlightenment. Yeah. Okay, let me see if we have any questions online here. All right, so we don't have any questions here. So what I'm going to do here is I'll introduce you, or I'll share this part. Let me just share this part. One of the ways that I teach is I teach you what the teachings are, and then I teach you what something isn't, because that helps you to understand what something is. So now that I've spent all this time to explain to you what enlightenment is, now I'm going to explain to you what enlightenment is not, because that's going to help you understand what enlightenment is. So the way to know that your mind is not enlightened is that you'll be experiencing these conditioned feelings. Remember, these are conditioned feelings. Based on some condition, you will have happiness, excitement, elation, thrill, exhilaration, euphoria. By the time you get to enlightenment, you're just happy all the time. It's unconditioned happiness. It's unconditioned joy. It's not going to be conditional. So if you get happy because of, that is a conditioned feeling. So if you get happy because you got a raise at work, that's a conditioned feeling. And now when you don't get a raise, you'll be sad or frustrated. Or if you get happy because of going to Thailand, now when you're not in Thailand anymore, you won't be happy, right? So if you get happy because of something, this is a conditioned feeling. By the time you get to enlightenment, you can be happy no matter where you are, no matter what you're doing, no matter what your bank account balance is. You're always going to be happy. So if you're noticing conditional pleasant feelings, painful feelings, or neither painful nor pleasant, this is called discontentedness, then you know that your mind is not enlightened. So if you experience sadness, anger, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, you know that your mind's not enlightened. But you know what? No big deal. There's a lot of unenlightened beings in the world. Now's your opportunity to learn about how to get to enlightenment, right? So if this is what you're experiencing, it's understandable. There's many people who are unenlightened in the world. If you have a craving to go out into the world and tell other people that you are enlightened, you know that you're not enlightened, right? So if you go up to your friends and be like, hey, guess what, man? I'm enlightened. You're not enlightened yet, right? So getting to enlightenment, it isn't something that you're going to put on your Facebook page or your Instagram profile. That's not what you're doing, right? You're not going to call up mom and say, hey, mom, guess what? I'm enlightened, right? This is an indication that you're not enlightened. You wouldn't go around bragging to other people that you're enlightened. That's the ego. That's the desire for something. It's like, what do you want? Do you want us to admire you? What do you want from us? Why are you telling us that you're enlightened? If you're so enlightened and you're so peaceful and so joyful, go be peaceful and joyful. You don't need to come around here and tell us about it. Just go be peaceful and joyful, right? So if anybody ever tells you that they're enlightened, that's a perfect thing to be able to see that that person is not enlightened. And same thing for you. If you were out there blabbing to other people that you're enlightened, you know that you're not enlightened. Another way that you can tell you're not enlightened is if you have complacency, if you have a lack of motivation or a lack of initiative or enthusiasm or a willingness to do something. You know that dull thing that you feel sometimes when you just want to sit at home and do nothing all day long and just sit around and feel dull and lethargic? That's the complacency. If you notice that in your mind, then you know your mind is not enlightened, because an enlightened being, their mind is going to be bright, it's going to be uplifted, it's going to have enthusiasm and a willingness to do something. They will rest, they will relax, but they're not going to be dull and lethargic during that time frame. It's an isolated period of time. They're going to rest, they're going to relax, and then afterwards they're going to go off and do whatever they need to do. They're going to live a balanced life, but they're not going to be dull and complacent. They're going to be moving their life forward day to day, moment to moment. So this is how you know that your mind is not enlightened. Okay? All right. So what I'm going to do here is take a break for lunch. It's basically about 12 o'clock. We're going to get back together at 1:30, and that's where we're going to pick up teaching you about the history of chanting, the benefits of chanting, and then I'm going to teach you how to actually chant as a class. We'll actually be doing this together. So if you guys would like to go enjoy some lunch and then come back, I'm going to get started at 1:30. For those of you guys that are online, that's about an hour and a half from now. I'll get started teaching you guys chanting. So thank you guys for your questions. Thank you for your interest to learn, and I'll see you guys after lunch perhaps. Okay? Enjoy yourself. Yay! All right. Have fun. Lots of good food in Thailand.